The polished glass doors of Elite Motors in Beverly Hills gleamed under the California sun, reflecting wealth, exclusivity, and ambition. Inside, the showroom was a cathedral of luxury. Marble floors shimmered like liquid silver, crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across the ceiling, and cars worth more than most people's homes stood like sculptures. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys, each a testament to success. The air was thick with the scent of leather and polish, but on this particular morning, it was about to be shattered by a voice so explosive it could have cracked the glass walls. "Get her out of here. Now!" Ethan Carter's voice boomed through the showroom like a thunderclap, his face flushed crimson, veins pulsing in his neck. The manager of Elite Motors pointed a trembling finger at a black woman standing near a sleek black BMW, her casual jeans and faded t-shirt a stark contrast to the opulence around her. "Call security. I want this woman gone." His words ricocheted off the walls, freezing customers mid-conversation and halting employees in their tracks. The tension was so palpable you could have sliced it with a knife. The woman, Maya Harrison, stood motionless, her dark eyes locked on Ethan with a composure that was almost unnerving. At 42, she carried herself with a quiet strength, her expression unreadable but radiating a controlled intensity that made the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. Instead, she spoke with a precision that cut deeper than any shout. "You have no idea what you've just done," she said, her voice low and steady, each word laced with a chilling promise. It wasn't a threat, it was a prophecy. And in that moment, you knew a line had been crossed. Have you ever been judged for how you look? For the clothes you wear or the car you drive? Hit the subscribe button now and type "justice" in the comments. Because what you're about to witness is a story where actions have consequences, and karma wears a face you'll never forget. Maya Harrison wasn't just any woman. She was the CEO of Harrison Automotive Group, a self-made millionaire who had clawed her way from the grease-stained floors of her uncle's Detroit garage to the helm of one of America's most successful luxury car empires. 12 dealerships across the state, each a jewel in her crown, bore her name. Elite Motors, her latest acquisition, was the shiniest yet, a Beverly Hills masterpiece catering to Hollywood stars, tech moguls, and old-money families who tossed around six-figure purchases like pocket change. But beneath the glitz, something rotten was festering, and Maya was here to rip it out at the roots. For weeks, whispers had reached her office, subtle complaints from former customers, hushed stories that churned her stomach. Tales of being ignored, dismissed, or treated like they didn't belong, all based on how they dressed, where they came from, or the color of their skin. These weren't loud lawsuits or scathing online reviews, but quiet, insidious hints that something was deeply wrong with the culture at Elite Motors. Maya had built her empire on integrity and respect, values forged in the crucible of her own struggles as a black woman in a cutthroat industry. The idea that her newest dealership was betraying those principles wasn't just a business problem. It was personal. So, Maya devised a plan as bold as it was risky. She would go undercover in her own dealership. No corporate memos, no advance warnings, no polished presentations, just raw, unfiltered truth. This wasn't about catching a few bad apples. It was about testing the soul of her company. If her suspicions were correct, if her employees were discriminating based on appearance or race, it could unravel everything she'd spent decades building. Lawsuits, boycotts, a tarnished reputation. Everything was at stake. But Maya couldn't live with uncertainty. She needed the truth, even if it burned. To pull it off, Maya had to erase every trace of the CEO the world knew. Gone were the tailored designer suits that cost more than a month's rent, the diamond earrings that caught light from across a boardroom, The sleek Bentley Continental GT she drove to business meetings. She dug through the back of her walk-in closet, pulling out relics from a life she'd left behind. Faded blue jeans with worn patches at the knees, sneakers scuffed from years of use, a t-shirt that screamed discount rack. Staring at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman looking back. The polished executive was gone, replaced by someone who could have been anyone, a teacher, a single mom, a delivery driver. Someone who, in the eyes of Elite Motors staff, wouldn't belong. But the final touch was the most deliberate. Instead of her Bentley, her Tesla Model S, or even the classic 1967 Mustang she cherished for weekend drives, Maya chose her 2015 Honda Civic. Reliable, practical, unremarkable. At a dealership where the cheapest car on the lot cost more than most people's annual salary, pulling up in a 9-year-old Civic was like waving a flag that said, "I don't belong here." And that was exactly the point. Maya wanted to see how her employees treated someone they assumed had no money, no status, no power. She wanted to know who they really were when they thought no one important was watching. As she pulled into the parking lot of Elite Motors, the Honda's engine humming softly, Maya's heart pounded not with fear, but with resolve. She stepped out, her sneakers scuffing against the asphalt, and took a deep breath. The glass doors loomed ahead, a gateway to the truth. What she didn't know was that the next hour would expose a betrayal so blatant, so systemic, it would shake her to her core and force her to make decisions that would change lives forever. Inside the showroom, the air was cool and sterile, a stark contrast to the heat of the moment about to unfold. Salespeople in crisp suits glided between customers, their smiles practiced and their voices dripping with charm. A young couple in designer clothes was being offered coffee, their every word met with eager nods. An older man in a tailored blazer was being led to a gleaming Rolls-Royce, the salesperson practically bowing. But as Maya stepped through those pristine glass doors, it was as if she'd become invisible. 3 salespeople on the floor, all busy, all glancing her way, all choosing to look through her. She stood there for a full 5 minutes, her presence unacknowledged, her patience a silent test. Among the staff, one figure stood out. James Parker, a soft-spoken salesman in his late 20s, new to Elite Motors and still finding his footing. Unlike his colleagues, James noticed Maya. His eyes lingered on her, a flicker of unease crossing his face as he saw her being ignored. He took a step toward her, his mouth opening to offer a greeting, but a sharp glance from Ethan Carter stopped him cold. "Focus on the real customers, Parker," Ethan hissed under his breath, his tone dripping with authority. James hesitated, his shoulders slumping, and returned to his post. That moment, small but significant, planted a seed of doubt in his mind about the place he worked for. Maya's gaze swept the room, taking in every detail. The polished cars, the smug confidence of the staff, the customers being fawned over. She felt a familiar sting, one she hadn't felt since her early days in Detroit, when a car salesman had laughed at her teenage dream of buying a used sedan with her hard-earned savings. That memory fueled her now, a reminder of why she'd built Harrison Automotive Group to be different. She straightened her shoulders, her worn jeans and t-shirt a deliberate disguise, and walked toward the reception desk. The test had begun, and her employees had no idea they were about to be judged by the very woman who signed their paychecks. But as Maya approached the desk, where a young woman named Claire Bennett sat typing with manicured nails, she could already sense the storm brewing. Claire's perfectly styled blonde hair and designer blouse screamed privilege, and the dismissive glance she shot Maya before returning to her screen spoke volumes. This was no ordinary customer service failure. This was the beginning of a reckoning, one that would expose the ugly truth lurking beneath the polished surface of Elite Motors. And Maya Harrison was ready to face it head-on. The air inside Elite Motors was cool, almost clinical, but to Maya Harrison, it felt heavy with unspoken judgments. She stood in the center of the showroom, her worn sneakers silent on the gleaming marble floor, her faded t-shirt a deliberate rebellion against the opulence surrounding her. Ferraris and Lamborghinis gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, each car a monument to wealth, but Maya might as well have been a ghost. 5 minutes had passed since she'd walked through the glass doors of her own dealership, and not a single salesperson had acknowledged her existence. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the laughter and chatter lavished on other customers, those in tailored suits and designer sunglasses, whose every word was met with eager smiles and offers of espresso. Maya's eyes scanned the room, taking in the scene with the precision of a seasoned strategist. A young couple in their 30s, dripping in luxury brands, was being guided toward a Bentley by a salesman who hung on their every word. An older man in a crisp blazer was test driving a Rolls-Royce, the keys handed over without so much as a question. But Maya, in her old jeans and scuffed sneakers, was invisible. She caught the fleeting glances of salespeople as they passed eyes. That met hers for a split second before sliding away, as if she were a smudge on their pristine world. The disrespect was so blatant, it was almost surreal. A masterclass in dismissal that stung more than she'd expected. Her mind flickered to a memory from 25 years ago, when she was 17, standing in a dusty Detroit dealership with a fistful of crumpled bills she'd saved from 2 years of waitressing. The salesman had smirked, his eyes raking over his second-hand clothes, and said, "Kid, maybe try the bus station instead." That moment had lit a fire in her, a determination to build a company where no one would be judged by their appearance. Now, standing in Elite Motors, her own dealership, that fire flared again. This wasn't just a test of her employees, it was a test of everything she'd built. She moved toward the reception desk, where Claire Bennett sat, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her nails clicking rhythmically on the keyboard. Claire's designer blouse and flawless makeup screamed privilege, but her demeanor screamed something else entirely: contempt. Maya stood patiently for nearly a minute, her shadow falling across the desk, but Claire didn't look up. Finally, with a sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 inconveniences, Claire flicked her eyes upward, her gaze raking over Maya's outfit with a sneer that could have curdled milk. "If you're here about a job," she said, her voice as cold as the marble beneath her, "applications are online. We don't take walk-ins." The words hit like a slap, but Maya kept her face neutral, her years of boardroom battles honing her ability to mask her emotions. The assumption wasn't just rude, it was a deliberate jab, a way to make her feel small, out of place. She could feel the eyes of other customers glancing her way, some curious, some amused, as if her presence were a sideshow. Among them was a familiar face, a Hollywood actor, his watch glinting under the chandeliers, watching the scene unfold with a raised eyebrow. Maya noted his presence. His reaction could amplify whatever happened next, for better or worse. "I'm not here for a job," Maya said, her voice calm but firm, the kind of tone that demanded attention without raising a decibel. "I'd like to look at some cars." Claire's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a patronizing smile. "Honey," she said, the word dripping with condescension, "our cheapest car is 40 grand. There's a used lot down the street. That might be more your speed." The audacity was breathtaking, a calculated dismissal designed to humiliate. Maya's jaw tightened, but she held her ground, her silence louder than any retort. That's when Ethan Carter made his entrance, striding across the showroom with the swagger of a man who believed he owned the world. At 38, Ethan carried himself like a king, his slick-back hair and tailored suit a uniform of arrogance. His career had been built on charming the rich and dismissing everyone else. and his fake smile didn't reach his eyes as he approached. "Ma'am," he said, his tone laced with superiority, "I think there's been a misunderstanding." He didn't introduce himself, didn't ask how he could help. The word misunderstanding was code for "you don't belong here," and he delivered it with the confidence of someone who'd done this 100 times before. Maya's heart sank, not from embarrassment but from the realization that her worst fears were coming true. This wasn't a one-off mistake. It was a pattern. She'd heard the whispers about Elite Motors customers turned away, judged, dismissed, but seeing it first and was like a knife to the gut. Still, she pressed forward, determined to see how deep this rot went. "I'd like to see your luxury sedans," she said, her voice steady, her eyes locked on Ethan's. It was a simple request, one any customer could make, but Ethan's response was a masterclass in discrimination disguised as policy. "Those are for serious buyers," he said, emphasizing serious like a weapon. "We require pre-approved financing and identification." His smile was so transparent, it was almost insulting. He wasn't offering to show her the cars. He was demanding proof she could afford to even look. Maya's fingers twitched at her side, the urge to reveal her identity bubbling beneath her calm exterior. That this was a test, and she needed to see it through. Across the room, James Parker, the young salesman, watched the exchange with growing unease. He'd only been at Elite Motors for 3 months, but he'd already noticed the unspoken rules. Prioritize the wealthy, ignore the wrong kind of customers. He tried to approach Maya earlier, sensing she deserved better, but Ethan's sharp rebuke had stopped him. Now, as he saw Ethan's dismissive tone and Claire's smug grin, James felt a knot in his stomach. He glanced at the Hollywood actor, who was now openly staring, his phone in hand as if ready to record. The pressure in the room was building, and James sensed it could explode at any moment. Maya walked toward a stunning BMW sedan, its $85,000 price tag gleaming under the showroom lights. She ran her hand along its smooth black surface, her movements deliberate, admiring the craftsmanship. It was a car that screamed success, the kind she dreamed of owning as a teenager. But before she could linger, Ethan stormed over, his face a mask of outrage. "Ma'am, I'm gonna need 3 forms of identification and recent bank statements before you touch anything," he barked, his voice loud enough to draw every eye in the showroom. The demand was absurd. No other customer was being asked for paperwork, just to look at a car. It was discrimination, pure and simple, and it was meant to humiliate. Maya's eyes flicked to Derek Malone, the security guard Ethan had summoned. Derek was a hulking figure, his hand resting on his radio as if ready to call for backup. "Just in case," Ethan said loudly, his words a clear message. Maya was a threat, not a customer. Derek didn't grab her, as Ethan might have hoped. But his looming presence and the threat of calling the police were enough to make the point. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable at one of our other locations," Ethan added, the pause before other locations heavy with meaning. It was segregation dressed up as customer service, a polite way of saying, go somewhere else where your kind belongs. The showroom had gone quiet, the other customers watching the spectacle unfold. The Hollywood actor was now filming discreetly, his presence a ticking time bomb that could turn this into a public relations nightmare. Maya felt the weight of every stare, but she stood taller, her dignity unshaken. She'd seen enough to confirm her worst fears, but she needed more evidence, more proof that this wasn't just one bad day, but a systemic failure. "I'll leave," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "But I'll be back." The promise in her words sent a shiver through the room. Though Ethan, smug in his victory, didn't catch the danger dot as Maya walked out, her sneakers echoing on the marble, she felt a storm brewing inside her, not of anger, but of resolve. She climbed into her Honda Civic, her hands gripping the steering wheel, and let the weight of what she'd experienced settle. This wasn't just about her. It was about every customer who'd been judged, dismissed, or humiliated in her dealership. She reached for her phone and dialed Emily Davis, her trusted assistant. "Emily," she said, her voice deadly calm. "They failed. Spectacularly." The words were a signal, a declaration of war on the toxic culture festering in Elite Motors. "Prepare Protocol 7, she added, her tone carrying the weight of a guillotine. "This ends today." From the parking lot through the massive glass windows, Maya watched as another customer entered, a young black woman in a sharp business suit, radiating confidence. Her heart sank. She knew exactly what was about to happen, and it would confirm that the problem wasn't personal. It was policy. Maya Harrison sat in the driver's seat of her 2015 Honda Civic, the engine off, the parking lot of Elite Motors stretching out before her like a stage set for betrayal. Through the massive glass windows of the showroom, she could see the polished world she'd just been ejected from, marble floors gleaming under chandeliers. Cars that cost more than most people's homes displayed like trophies. But the scene inside was no longer just a business problem. It was a wound, raw and personal. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, not trembling from fear or shame, but from a white-hot resolve that burned brighter with every passing second. The humiliation she'd endured, Claire's condescending sneer, Ethan's smug demands, Derek's looming threat, wasn't just about her. It was a symptom of something far uglier, and Maya was about to see it play out again. Her phone buzzed in her hand, Emily Davis's name flashing on the screen. "Everything's in motion," Emily said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. "Protocol 7 paperwork is being drafted. Legal and HR are on standby. What's next?" Maya's eyes never left the showroom. "Wait for my signal," she said, her voice low, carrying the weight of a storm about to break. "I'm not done here yet." She ended the call and slipped her phone into her pocket, her gaze locked on the glass doors as a new figure stepped through them. The woman was young, maybe late 20s, with the kind of polished confidence that came from years of hard work. Lauren Brooks wore a tailored navy suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, her posture radiating purpose. She carried a leather briefcase, the kind that screamed young professional on the rise, someone who'd fought for every step up the corporate ladder. To Maya, Lauren was everything Elite Motors should have celebrated: ambition, success, the promise of a big sale. But Maya's heart sank as she watched, because she knew exactly what awaited Lauren inside those pristine walls. The same script that had humiliated her was about to unfold again, and it would prove that the rot in her dealership wasn't a fluke, it was policy. From her vantage point in the parking lot, Maya watched as Lauren approached Claire Bennett at the reception desk. Claire barely glanced up, her fingers pausing mid-type before resuming with an exaggerated sigh. Maya couldn't hear the words, but she could read the body language like a book. Claire's head tilted slightly, her lips curling into that same patronizing smile Maya had faced minutes earlier. Lauren stood patiently, her briefcase clutched at her side, but Claire's dismissive wave pointing toward the exit, or perhaps the fictional, used lot down the street, was unmistakable. Maya's jaw tightened, her fingers curling into fists. This wasn't just déjà vu. It was a mirror reflecting the ugliness she'd built her empire to eradicate. Her mind flashed back to a moment from her early 20s, standing outside her uncle's garage in Detroit, overhearing a customer complain about being turned away because of his accent and worn clothes. Her uncle had pulled her aside, his voice heavy with wisdom. "Maya, people will judge you by what they see first. You can't change their eyes, but you can change their minds." That lesson had driven her to create Harrison Automotive Group, a company where every customer was supposed to be treated with dignity. Now, watching Lauren endure the same dismissal she'd faced, Maya felt that promise crumbling. The shame wasn't hers. It belonged to the employees betraying her vision. Inside the showroom, Ethan Carter noticed Lauren and approached, his stride as arrogant as ever. Maya couldn't hear his words, but his gestures told the story. The same fake smile, the same condescending tilt of his head, the same subtle step back as if Lauren's presence were an intrusion. Lauren's shoulders stiffened, but she held her ground, her voice steady as she gestured toward a silver Mercedes sedan. Ethan's response was a slow shake of his head, his arms crossing as if guarding the car from her touch. Maya's blood boiled. This wasn't just poor customer service. It was a deliberate act of exclusion, a system designed to protect the showroom's exclusivity at the expense of human dignity. Across the room, James Parker stood frozen, his eyes darting between Lauren and Ethan. He'd seen this play out before, not just with Maya, but with countless others who didn't fit Ethan's narrow definition of a serious buyer. James had joined Elite Motors hoping to learn from the best, but what he'd found was a culture that rewarded prejudice and punished decency. Earlier, when he tried to approach Maya, Ethan's sharp rebuke had stung, but now, watching Lauren being dismissed, he felt a deeper unease. He took a hesitant step forward, his mouth opening to intervene, but Ethan shot him a look that pinned him in place. "Stay out of it, Parker," Ethan snapped, loud enough for nearby customers to turn. James's face flushed, his hands clenching at his sides, but he backed off, his silence a small betrayal he'd carry with him. Maya's eyes flicked to another figure in the showroom, the Hollywood actor she'd noticed earlier, now leaning against a pillar, his phone subtly angled toward the scene. His presence was a wild card, a potential catalyst for public exposure. If he posted about this online, it could spiral into a PR nightmare or a reckoning. Maya pulled out her own phone and began recording, the lens capturing every dismissive gesture, every patronizing smirk. She wasn't just gathering evidence for her own case. She was documenting a pattern that could no longer be ignored. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what she was witnessing. This wasn't about one bad employee or one bad day. This was a culture that had festered under her watch, and she was done letting it spread. Lauren, still in the showroom, tried to push forward, pointing again at the Mercedes. But Ethan's body language grew more aggressive, his hand gesturing toward the exit as if ushering her out. Derek Malone, the security guard, loomed nearby, his hand on his radio, a silent threat that mirrored his earlier intimidation of Maya. Lauren's face tightened, her professionalism cracking under the weight of humiliation. She wasn't just being denied service, she was being made to feel like she didn't belong, like her success, her suit, her ambition meant nothing in this polished palace of prejudice. Maya's heart ached for Lauren, but it also hardened her resolve. She thought of every customer who'd walked through those doors only to be judged by their skin, their clothes, their car. She thought of the young Maya, saving for months to buy a beat-up sedan, only to be laughed out of a dealership. This wasn't just about Elite Motors. It was about every person who'd been made to feel less than human. Her phone buzzed again. A text from Emily. "Legal team is ready. Awaiting your call." Maya's thumb hovered over the screen, then typed a message that carried the weight of a thunderbolt. "It's worse than we thought. Initiate Protocol 7. Protocol 7 was the nuclear option at Harrison Automotive Group, a last resort reserved for crises that threatened the company's core values. It meant immediate action firings, audits, cultural overhauls, no questions asked, no excuses accepted. Maya had hoped she'd never need it, but as she watched Lauren endure the same degradation she'd faced, she knew there was no other choice. This wasn't a problem that could be fixed with a memo or a training session. This was a reckoning, and heads were going to roll. She made another call, this time to Michael Lee, the regional manager overseeing multiple dealerships. "Michael," she said, her voice steady but laced with steel, "get to Elite Motors. Now, it's urgent." Michael's response was immediate. A stammered, "I'm on my way, Miss Harrison." He knew what Protocol 7 meant, and the panic in his voice told Maya he was already bracing for the fallout. She hung up, her eyes returning to the showroom, where Lauren was now walking toward the exit, her head high but her steps heavy with the weight of rejection. Maya started her Honda Civic, the engine's hum a quiet contrast to the storm brewing inside her. She drove out of the parking lot, her mind racing with plans. In less than an hour, she'd return not as the invisible woman in jeans, but as Maya Harrison, CEO, a force of nature ready to dismantle the toxic culture she'd uncovered. Ethan, Claire, and Derek thought they'd won, that they'd protected their precious showroom from undesirable customers. They had no idea they'd just ignited a fire that would burn their careers to ashdod as she pulled onto the Beverly Hills streets. Maya's thoughts turned to Lauren, to James, to every person caught in the crossfire of this betrayal. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about justice, about dignity, about making sure no one else would walk into her dealership and feel the sting of prejudice. The test wasn't over. It was just beginning. The glass doors of Elite Motors swung open with a whisper, but the woman who stepped through them carried the weight of a hurricane. Maya Harrison was no longer the invisible figure in faded jeans and scuffed sneakers. Gone was the unassuming customer who'd been dismissed and humiliated an hour earlier. In her place stood a vision of power, a tailored black suit that hugged her frame like armor, Italian leather heels clicking sharply on the marble floor, and a diamond pendant catching the light of the chandeliers overhead. Her presence filled the showroom, commanding attention without a word, her dark eyes blazing with a quiet fury that made the air itself seem to hold its breath. The transformation was staggering. Salespeople froze mid-pitch, their practiced smiles faltering. Customers paused, sensing a shift in the room's energy. Even the Hollywood actor, still lingering near a sleek Ferrari, lowered his phone, his earlier recording forgotten as he watched the scene unfold. Maya's every step radiated authority, a stark contrast to the woman Ethan Carter had smugly ordered out of his showroom. The staff didn't know it yet, but they were about to face a reckoning that would shatter their world. Ethan Carter, standing near a polished Bentley, was the first to notice her. His slick-back hair and tailored suit couldn't hide the flicker of confusion in his eyes. There was something familiar about this woman, but his arrogance blinded him to the truth. He straightened, plastering on his signature fake smile, and strode toward her. "Look, lady," he said, his voice dripping with the same condescension he'd used before. "I thought we settled this. You can't just keep coming back." The audacity was breathtaking, a testament to his unshakable belief that he controlled this space, that he could dismiss anyone who didn't fit his narrow vision of worth. Maya didn't respond immediately. She let his words hang in the air, her silence a weapon sharper than any retort. Her eyes locked onto his unyielding, and for the first time, a shadow of doubt crossed Ethan's face. He opened his mouth to speak again, but Maya raised a hand, a subtle gesture that stopped him cold. "I'd like to speak with your district manager," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of a command. It wasn't a request, it was an order, delivered with the authority of someone who'd faced down boardrooms and hostile takeovers. The showroom fell silent, every eye on her. Ethan blinked, his confidence wavering. "Who are you?" he demanded, his tone still edged with superiority, as if he could bully his way through this moment. Maya's lips curved into a smile, not warm, not friendly, but the kind of smile that should have sent every person in that room running for cover. "Tell him Maya is here," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "He'll know." The certainty in her words was chilling, a promise of consequences that Ethan couldn't yet comprehend. Before Ethan could respond, the glass doors burst open and Michael Lee, the regional manager, stormed in. His expensive suit rumpled from his frantic drive across Beverly Hills. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the showroom's perfect air conditioning, and his eyes scanned the room with a desperation that bordered on panic. Michael was a man used to high-pressure situations, overseeing multiple dealerships and million-dollar deals. But right now, he looked like he was staring down the barrel of a career-ending disaster. When his gaze landed on Maya, the color drained from his face, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "Miss Harrison," he stammered, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and reverence. "I had no idea you were." He didn't finish, because Ethan, in a move that would haunt him for years, interrupted his boss's boss with a recklessness born of ignorance. "Harrison? Wait, how do you know this troublemaker?" He snapped, his voice loud enough to echo through the showroom. The word troublemaker landed like a grenade, and the gasps from nearby customers and staff were audible. Even the Hollywood actor raised an eyebrow, his phone back in hand, ready to capture what promised to be a spectacle. Michael's face went from pale to ashen, his eyes darting between Ethan and Maya as if he could will the situation to disappear. But Maya didn't flinch. She reached into her jacket with the precision of someone about to detonate a bomb, her fingers closing around a small, unassuming business card. She placed it on the marble counter between her and Ethan, the soft click of the card against the surface louder than any shout. The room seemed to hold its breath as Ethan glanced down, his eyes narrowing, then widening in horror as he read the words printed in crisp black ink. Maya Harrison, CEO, Harrison Automotive Group. The silence that followed was absolute. A vacuum, where every conversation, every movement, every breath stopped cold. Ethan's face crumpled, his smug confidence evaporating like mist under a blazing sun. Claire Bennett, the receptionist who dismissed Maya as a job seeker, froze at her desk, her manicured nails hovering over the keyboard, her mouth agape. Derek Malone, the security guard who'd loomed over Maya with a threatening glare, took a step back, his hand dropping from his radio as if it burned. James Parker, the young salesman who'd wanted to help but stayed silent, stared at Maya with a mix of relief and dread, realizing the test he'd sensed was now unfolding in devastating clarity. "I own this dealership," Maya said, her voice steady, each word a hammer striking the fragile egos of those who'd wronged her. "I own all 12 locations in this state." The weight of her revelation landed like a thunderbolt, shattering the illusions of superiority that had fueled Ethan's actions. The showroom, once a stage for his arrogance, was now a courtroom, and Maya was the judge, jury, and executioner. "For the past hour," she continued, her tone unwavering, "I've experienced the worst customer service of my life. But more than that, I've witnessed discrimination that goes against everything this company stands for." Ethan stammered, his voice shaking with desperation. But you can't be." He was grasping at straws, trying to deny the reality staring him in the face. His brain couldn't process that the woman he'd humiliated, the woman he'd ordered out of his showroom, was the head of his entire company. Claire's eyes welled with tears, her earlier smugness replaced by terror as she realized her career was unraveling. Derek shifted uncomfortably, his hulking frame shrinking under Maya's gaze. The Hollywood actor was now openly filming, his presence a ticking clock that could amplify this moment to millions. But Maya wasn't done. She turned to Ethan, her eyes boring into him with surgical precision. "I'm still interested in that BMW," she said, her voice deceptively calm, offering him one final chance to redeem himself. It was a test within a test, a moment to see if he could set aside his prejudice and treat her as a customer, even now. But Ethan, his arrogance blinding him to the warning signs, doubled down. "Ma'am, after your behavior earlier," he began, his tone dripping with blame, as if Maya's disguise justified his actions. The audacity was staggering, and it sealed his fate. Maya cut him off, her voice slicing through his words like a blade. "My behavior?" she said, her tone icy, each syllable a condemnation. "Let's talk about behavior." The words hung in the air, a promise that she was about to dismantle every discriminatory action, every condescending glance, every violation of her company's values. She turned to Michael, who was visibly sweating, his hands trembling as he realized the scope of the disaster. "Mr. Lee," she said, "observe how your staff treats potential customers. This is what I hired you to prevent." Michael nodded, his face a mask of panic, knowing that his oversight of Elite Motors had allowed this culture to fester. James Parker, standing near the back, felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. He'd seen Maya's strength, her dignity, and now he saw her power. He regretted his silence, but her presence gave him a flicker of courage. The other salespeople, some whispering apologies, others staring in stunned silence, began to grasp the magnitude of their failure. The Hollywood actor's camera was still, rolling, capturing every moment of this corporate implosion. Maya's gaze swept the room, taking in Lauren Brooks, the young professional still lingering near the Mercedes, her face a mix of confusion and hurt. Maya's heart tightened. She knew Lauren's pain, and she wouldn't let it go unaddressed. But first, she had to finish what she'd started. "This ends now," she said, her voice carrying across the showroom, a declaration that echoed with the promise of justice. Ethan's world was crumbling, and Maya Harrison was just getting started. The showroom of Elite Motors, once a glittering shrine to wealth and exclusivity, was now a battlefield of shattered egos and exposed truths. Maya Harrison stood at its center, her tailored suit a stark contrast to the faded jeans she'd worn. An hour ago, her presence commanding the silence that gripped the room. The business card on the marble counter, declaring her as the CEO of Harrison Automotive Group, was a guillotine blade that had already begun its descent. Ethan Carter's face was a mask of disbelief, his earlier arrogance replaced by a desperate stammer. Claire Bennett's eyes brimmed with tears, her manicured hands trembling as her career unraveled. Derek Malone, the security guard, shifted. Uneasily, his hulking frame diminished under the weight of Maya's gaze. The Hollywood actor, still filming discreetly, captured every moment, his presence a silent promise that this reckoning would echo far beyond these walls. Maya's voice cut through the tension, steady and unrelenting. "This dealership was built on respect and integrity," she said, her words carrying the weight of 30 years of struggle. "Today, you've shown me neither." Her eyes swept the room, landing on each employee, from the stunned salespeople to the frozen customers. But this isn't just about bad service. This is about a culture that judges people by their appearance, their race, their perceived worth. And that ends now. Ethan, his voice shaking, made a final, pathetic attempt to salvage his position. "Ms. Harrison, if I'd known who you were," he began, his words dripping with desperation, as if an apology could erase an hour of deliberate prejudice. Maya's gaze silenced him, her eyes cold and unyielding. "That's exactly the problem," she said, her voice a blade of truth. "Your respect shouldn't depend on knowing who I am. Every person who walks through these doors deserves dignity, whether they're driving a Honda or a Bentley, whether they're wearing jeans or a suit." The words landed like a manifesto, a declaration that would redefine Elite Motors or burn it to the ground. She turned to Michael Lee, the regional manager, whose sweat-soaked brow betrayed his terror. "Mr. Lee," she said, "you were hired to uphold our values. You failed, but you'll have a chance to fix this starting now." Michael nodded, his hands clasped as if in prayer, knowing his career hung by a thread. Maya's focus shifted back to Ethan, Claire, and Derek, her decision swift and merciless. Ethan Carter, Claire Bennett, Derek Malone. You terminated. Effective immediately. Pack your things and leave. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Ethan's knees buckled, his mouth opening in a silent protest, but no words came. His career in the automotive industry, built on schmoozing the wealthy and dismissing the rest, was over. Claire let out a choked sob, her earlier condescension. Honey, try the used lot, now a noose around her future in luxury retail. Derek's face hardened, his hand twitching toward his radio before dropping in defeat. His actions looming over Maya, threatening to call the police, had violated not just company policy but basic human decency, and his security license was likely to face scrutiny from the state board. The other employees stood frozen, their reactions a spectrum of shock and shame. Some whispered frantic apologies, others stared at the floor, realizing they'd been complicit in a culture that had just imploded. James Parker, the young salesman who'd hesitated to help Maya, felt a surge of guilt mixed with relief. He'd seen the warning signs, sensed the wrongness of Ethan's leadership, but his silence had made him part of the problem. Now, as Maya's words echoed, he vowed to do better. But Maya's vision extended beyond punishment. She wasn't here to destroy, she was here to rebuild. This dealership will change, she declared, her voice ringing with conviction. Starting today, every employee will undergo mandatory diversity training, not a half-day seminar, but ongoing education led by outside experts. We'll learn to treat every customer with respect, no matter who they are or what they look like. She outlined new hiring practices, prioritizing character over appearance, with interviews designed to test how candidates handled diverse customers. Every interaction would be monitored, every policy scrutinized to root out prejudice before it could take hold. The announcement was a seismic shift, a commitment to dismantle the toxic culture that had festered under Ethan's watch. Michael. Lee, still reeling, nodded vigorously, scribbling notes as if his life depended on it. The salespeople exchanged glances, some relieved, others terrified, knowing their own actions would now face scrutiny. The Hollywood actor, his camera still rolling, posted a clip to his social media, captioned, "Witness something unreal at Elite Motors today. Change is coming." The post was already gaining traction, a spark that could ignite a firestorm of public attention. Maya's gaze softened as it landed on Lauren Brooks, the young professional who'd been humiliated just as she had. Lauren stood near the silver Mercedes she'd wanted to see, her briefcase clutched tightly, her face a mix of defiance and hurt. Maya remembered her own youth, the sting of being dismissed as less than, and she knew Lauren's pain was more than a bad experience. It was a wound to her dignity. Maya approached her, her heels clicking softly, and the room watched in hushed anticipation. "Miss Brooks," Maya said, her voice warm but firm, "I saw what happened to you today, and I'm sorry. This dealership failed you, and that's on me." Lauren's eyes widened, surprise replacing her guarded expression. Maya continued, "You came here to celebrate your success, and you were treated like you didn't belong. That's not who we are or who we will be. I'd like to make this right." She gestured to the Mercedes. "That car is yours, at a significant discount, as a personal apology from me and Harrison Automotive Group." Lauren blinked, her composure cracking as gratitude and relief flooded her face. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted to be treated like any other customer." Maya placed a hand on her shoulder, a rare gesture of connection from a woman who'd learned to guard her emotions. "You will be," she said, "and so will everyone else who walks through these doors." The moment was a beacon of hope in the wreckage of the day, a reminder that justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about healing. Lauren's story wasn't just hers. It was the story of every customer who'd been judged and dismissed, and Maya was determined to make it right. She turned to James Parker, who'd been watching from the sidelines, his face a mix of awe and remorse. "Mr. Parker," she said, her tone shifting to one of quiet authority, "you saw what was wrong here. Even if you didn't act, I'm giving you a chance to lead. You're the interim manager, effective immediately. Don't let me down." James's eyes widened, his breath catching. "Thank you, Miss Harrison," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "I won't." It was a second chance, a lifeline for a young man who'd been caught in a toxic system, but wanted to do better. Maya nodded, her faith in him a spark that could ignite real change. As the staff dispersed, some packing their things, others whispering about the upheaval, Maya called a mandatory meeting. Standing before her employees, she shared a piece of her story. A girl from Detroit, working in her uncle's garage, dreaming of a world where success wasn't judged by skin or status. "I built this company to be different," she said, her voice resonating with conviction. "Today, we start over. We build a culture where character matters, where every customer is seen, where respect is non-negotiable." The meeting ended with a promise. Elite Motors would be a model of fairness, or it wouldn't exist at all. The Hollywood actor's post was now trending, with comments praising Maya's leadership and demanding accountability. The world was watching, and Maya was ready to lead the charge. As she stepped out of the showroom, her eyes caught Lawrence, who offered a small, grateful smile. In that moment, Maya knew this wasn't just about one dealership. It was about every person who'd ever been made to feel less than, and she would fight for them all. The sun dipped low over Beverly Hills, casting a golden glow across the glass facade of Elite Motors. Inside, the showroom was quiet, the chaos of the morning replaced by a tentative calm. Maya Harrison stood alone in her office on the dealership's upper floor, the city skyline stretching out beyond the window. Her tailored suit was still immaculate, but her posture had softened, the weight of the day settling into her bones. On her desk lay a framed photo from her teenage years, her younger self grinning beside her uncle in his Detroit garage, grease smudged on her cheek, a wrench in her hand. That girl had dreamed of building something bigger than herself, a business where respect was the currency, not wealth or status. Today, she'd fought to protect that dream, but the battle had left scars. Maya's eyes traced the photo, her thoughts drifting to the events that had unfolded. The memory of Ethan Carter's arrogance, Claire Bennett's condescension, and Derek Malone's threatening presence stung like fresh wounds. But it was Lauren Brooks's quiet dignity, James Parker's hesitant courage, and the Hollywood actor's silent witness that lingered most. They were the faces of a story that wasn't just about one dealership. It was about the kind of world she wanted to live in, the kind of legacy she wanted to leave behind. As she sat down, her phone buzzed with a notification. The actor's social media post had gone viral, now with over 1 million views. Its caption a rallying cry. "Change starts with accountability. Elite Motors, you're on notice." The world was watching, and Maya was ready to lead. Her reflection was interrupted by a soft knock. Emily Davis, her assistant, stepped inside, a tablet in hand. "The press is picking up the story," Emily said, her voice a mix of excitement and caution. "They're calling it a masterclass in corporate accountability. And Lauren Brooks just posted a review online, 5 stars for Elite Motors, praising your leadership." Maya's lips curved into a small smile, the first genuine one all day. "Good," she said. "Let's make sure it's not just words. Schedule a follow-up with Lauren. I want to know she's taken care of." 3 months later, Elite Motors was unrecognizable, not in its gleaming cars or marble floors, but in its soul. The mandatory diversity training Maya had mandated was in full swing. led by external experts who challenged employees to confront their biases head-on. New hiring practices prioritize character, with role-playing scenarios that tested how candidates treated customers from all walks of life. Salespeople were now evaluated not just on sales, but on their ability to make every customer feel valued, whether they drove a Honda Civic or a Rolls-Royce. James Parker, now the permanent manager, had risen to the occasion, his quiet integrity, shaping a team that was learning to see people, not stereotypes. Maya walked through the showroom on a crisp morning, her presence no longer a shock, but a reminder of the standard she'd set. A young couple in casual clothes was being shown a Tesla, the salesperson's enthusiasm genuine. An elderly man in a worn jacket was offered coffee, his questions answered with patience. The air felt lighter, the chandeliers casting a warmer glow. James approached her, a clipboard in hand. "We've had a 20% increase in customer satisfaction scores," he said, a hint of pride in his voice. "And Lauren Brooks came by yesterday. She loves her Mercedes, and she brought her colleagues to shop here." Maya nodded, her eyes catching sight of a new plaque on the wall, engraved with her words from that fateful day. "Judge people by their character, not their appearance." It was a promise, a guiding star for every employee who walked these floors. She thought of Lauren, whose online review had ended with a line that struck her heart. "For the first time, I felt seen." That was the victory, not the firings, not the viral post, but the knowledge that one person had left this dealership feeling valued, respected. Hold out her thoughts turned to the broader impact. The Hollywood actor's post had sparked a movement, with other businesses facing scrutiny for their own discriminatory practices. At an industry conference in Los Angeles, Maya took the stage, her voice steady as she addressed a packed auditorium. "Character is revealed in how we treat those we think don't matter," she said, her words echoing through the hall. "Every customer, every person, deserves respect, not because of who they are, but because they are human." The applause was thunderous, but for Maya, the real reward was the emails that followed, business owners pledging to overhaul their cultures. Inspired by her stand, back in her office, Maya opened a letter from her uncle's widow, who'd read about the events online. "You made him proud," it read, "building a company that stands for something real." Tears pricked Maya's eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that her journey, from a girl in a garage to a CEO reshaping an industry, had come full circle. She wasn't just fighting for her company. She was fighting for every person who'd been judged, dismissed, or made to feel small. And she'd keep fighting, because that was who she was. This story isn't just about a CEO taking down a toxic culture. It's about the power of human dignity. Maya Harrison's journey reminds us that true leadership isn't about power or profit. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's hard, even when it costs. She could have fired Ethan, Claire, and Derek and walked away, but she chose to rebuild, to heal, to ensure that no one else would feel the sting of prejudice in her dealership. Her compassion for Lauren Brooks, her faith in James Parker, and her unwavering commitment to change show us what it means to lead with heart. The lessons here are timeless. We all judge, consciously or not, based on appearances, clothes, cars, skin color, accents. But character, as Maya said, is revealed in how we treat those we think don't matter. Ethan's downfall wasn't just about losing his job. It was about the consequences of a life built on prejudice. Lauren's triumph wasn't just about a discounted Mercedes. It was about reclaiming her worth. And Maya's victory wasn't just about saving her company. It was about proving that justice, when paired with compassion, can change the world. This story challenges us to look in the mirror. How do we treat the cashier, the delivery driver, the stranger who doesn't look like they belong? Do we see their humanity, or do we see only what our biases allow? Maya's stand at Elite Motors is a call to action, to be better, to do better, to build a world where respect is universal. It's a reminder that karma isn't always mystical. Sometimes it's the natural consequence of our choices, delivered by someone who refuses to let injustice stand. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the kind of person you want to be, then join us at Legacy Stories. Hit the subscribe button and share this tale with others who need to hear it. Every week, we bring you stories of courage, justice, and humanity, stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us what it means to live with purpose. Type Legacy in the comments to let us know you're with us, and let's keep these stories alive. Because in a world that often judges by appearances, stories like Maya's remind us to judge by character and to never stop fighting for what's right.